And it's been a while, but we are back. What's going on, legend? But welcome back to Beyond the 90. We've got, again, a very special guest we've been trying to get on for a while. Finally going to happen. We've got Anil. He's got some fantastic information to show us about, again, the preseason. But first of all, Anil, how are you doing?
Hey, Neil, very good. Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for finally having me on. If I'm being honest, still a little bit depressed about what happened last season. I think some of the changes that the club has made are starting to make me feel a bit more excited. I have to say, I'm actually really glad that we went for Maresca over like a Dean Smith or Scott Parker, because it gives us something. Well, and that's one of the reasons why I've come on the show. So, just for the viewers, why is this random guy even turned up? So, I'm a bit of an old school guy, big Leicester fan. First game I ever went to was the 3-3 game with Arsenal when Dennis Bergkamp scored those 2 amazing goals, but we still equalised. I was hooked on Leicester ever since then. But I also do coaching in my spare time, and I've actually got an FA level 2, which is a pretty high up badge. Took like 100 hours to do, so humble brag. But as part of that, you have to do a lot of like research into the tactics and analysis. And before the time of social media, people used to use internet forums, and I'm quite well known on the Fox's Talk forum, and I got a thread there about tactics, and specifically we've been talking about Maresca and people saying things. So I wanted to come on because I think hopefully what we all really hope for is that not only will the results improve on the pitch this year, but hopefully like just the level of play. Because I don't know about you, but Brendan Ball, by the end of it, I mean, your face says it all. It was like watching paint dry, and hopefully we can get some excitement and see some goals. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like win or lose, I don't mind as long as I was entertained and the team had a go. And I just really hope we get back to it. And I'm excited because I think we have got a manager who's going to do that. So there you go.
Yeah, and it's not going to be easy. Again, you've got a fantastic presentation to bring up. So again, didn't expect that. Thank you so much. But we are, again, it's going to take time for this style to be implemented. It looks like the players that are catching on at the moment, but feel free to take away with the presentation as well, because yeah, thanks for getting all this done.
No worries. Well, maybe before we do, we can just touch on some things. So since I guess like everyone's probably seen, we played Northampton at their ground. We managed to win just 1-0, but some really interesting things in the kind of tactical shape. We made a few signings. There's going to be some departures too, so we'll kind of cover all that. But let's kind of get on them with Enzo Maresca, the new manager. What's he all about and what's he doing for us? So firstly, I want to say a big shout out to Tactica. He's been on your show plenty of times before. Absolute don. I've taken a lot of images from him. I didn't tell him I was doing that, so hopefully he will allow me to do that. Let's talk about formations, right? So the really interesting thing, and I think this is kind of interesting in modern football in general, is that like formations are becoming really, really fluid. Like back in the day, it was old school 4-4-2. You stood in the same place and you did the kind of same thing. But what's happening a lot right now is that formations are changing mid-match, and they even change upon like where you are based on the pitch and what you're doing. And we talk about transitions. We're going to go into some of that stuff in a moment. So just to kind of explain sort of like the Pep Guardiola ideology, because Enzo Maresca is obviously a student from that, is he's really into kind of like this concept of superiorities. So superiorities is trying to create a situation on the pitch where you have an advantage that the opponent can't do. That could be like 2 versus 1. It could be 1 versus 1, but it's Mahrez against a small child. So the small child has no kind of ability to beat him in a one-on-one, that sort of thing. So out of possession, this is what we look. So when we start the game, the team will look like this. We play 2 teams during that match, and it's a kind of traditional 4-3-3 with one single pivot, which is either Harry Winks or in this particular game, Hamza Chowdhury, although that has changed depending on the game that we've kind of played. Winks, of course, being a new signing, and it's interesting to see that we've gone for a player like that who's like really good at kind of short passing and playing it around the corner versus a kind of more typical destroyer like Wilfred Ndidi. So here we can see literally this is in the game. Now here we are actually in possession. So you might think, hang on a minute, it says out of possession, but this was just after a turnover. But you can see the kind of shape. So I've highlighted here Ricardo Pereira, and he is actually standing in the right back position. You might see the guy on the ball is Callum Doyle, another new signing who is kind of like a left back, but can also play as a left centre back. So he's a bit hybrid, can play between the two. And this will be our shape when we're out of the ball and trying to defend and, blocking the space and the gaps here. So that is, pretty traditional, has been seen quite a few times before. But the kind of innovation that Pep really kind of used last season to win the treble, so it's pretty effective, is this, the 3-2-4-1. And this is how we shape up when we have possession. And the biggest difference is that here, Ricardo or JJ, when he comes into the team in our second half, is he shifts into field and we make a double pivot here in midfield. So we hang a 3-2-4-1. So the kind of downsides of this is you now have a kind of man less in your defensive phase, but the advantage is that in midfield, you've got an extra man. Superiorities, something that you can kind of take advantage of. So here's how we can see the block here. And you can see that this is the big difference. So now Callum Doyle has come here and he's come into a kind of left centre-back role. Wout Faes has gone over to the right centre-back role. And Connor Cody's kind of like the quarterback and the marshal of the team. And that's another new signing that we made. Sorely needed some sort of leadership back there. But I think what this game really shows is Connor Cody is actually an excellent distributor of the ball. It has been said in many teams that he struggled to play in a back four, but was very good in a back three. And if you think about it, the system that we're using is probably really well suited to Connor Cody because we are a three at times, but we're a four otherwise. We're not really sacrificing anything, but getting the advantage. And he starts a lot of the attacks. And he's also the one player in the team, it seems, who has license to play the long kind of quarterback balls like a David Beckham. Everyone else can play long, but they got to play against the ground. Whereas Cody is allowed to have license to play it long. And there are some kind of examples of that later. And here you can see the double pivot. So we've got Ricardo, we've got Harry Winks. And look how close they're standing to one another, right? But again, in this kind of picture, you can see there's 3 Northampton players and there's 5 Leicester players. So already we've got opportunities to play passing triangles. So kind of going back here, you can see how every time that anyone has the ball, they've got 2 players that they can reach with a kind of simple pass, allow them to get control. So the big thing about Pep is that he really loves control of the game. And this might scare a lot of people because that's a very Brendanism as well. He loved to have control as well. There was one famous game, I think it was against Sheffield United, where we were like 2-0 up and he was actually upset in the second half that the team continued to attack because he wanted them to control the game. And that might be kind of like, alarming thinking. But the point is that football in general, it's like a, high variation game and it's low scoring. So the point is you could set up your team amazing, be playing brilliant, and then Vincent Kompany picks up the ball and smashes it in from 30 yards top bins, and you've lost 1-0. And it doesn't matter that you played good or you stood out the Man City defense, it's game over. So for that reason, he tries to get something that is about consistency. And this is why Pep has done so well with teams that can get 100 points in the league, 90 points in the league, because he just knows the percentage that means more times than not you're going to win. And I think that really bodes well for us going into a 46-game season. Because the truth is that in the Championship, you don't actually have to be amazing every week. You just have to be good enough every week. 7 out of 10 every week, you're probably going to get promoted. So moving on, one really big thing about this is this kind of concept of a box midfield. So this is something that I think is worth a bit of discussion because it's kind of pivotal to the way that Leicester are going to be playing this season. These 4 players standing in this position creates this kind of box shape. And what that means is that you have not only a pass to find, but it means that if you're quick with your passing, and this is a big difference between this season and last, is that you're going to be able to find the spare man who is completely free and then can do whatever he wants. And this is the kind of point. So who that man is going to be is going to depend on who picks up the ball and when. And finding that person is always going to be difficult. So that's why you've got to have good players. And I think it's not a surprise for me, for example, to see that Harry Winks played this role and not Wilfred Ndidi. Because Wilfred Ndidi, even though we all love him when he was at best, he was amazing, he's always someone who can get hunted down. So you need someone who's kind of press resistant, we call it, right? And who can find the ball. And so here,
with Ndidi, and that's one thing that surprised me, especially in the Northampton game, especially in the second half, how high he was playing.
Oh, we're going to talk about that. That was pretty interesting. I mean, that was kind of a controversial one. Some people think, is Maresca mad? Some people think he's a genius. I would say in pre-season, especially if you're a new manager, trying different players in different roles is actually quite a healthy thing to do. Like, I think sometimes people can get obsessed with like, oh, this player, he must be a right back. This player, he must be a left winger. But why? It's about the attributes that you have. We've seen players reinvent themselves multiple times. Like Joe Linton's got to be the best example of that, right? Eddie Howe goes to Newcastle, goes, dude, you're not a striker, you're a box-to-box midfielder. He puts him here and he's absolutely fantastic, right? Granit Xhaka, laughing stock for Arsenal, on the way out after really upsetting their fans, changes his position slightly, boom, almost leads them to the title. So I'm not saying Wilfred Ndidi is going to become the next, Kevin De Bruyne, but maybe he will. I don't know in the Championship. We'll see. Anyway, back to the box midfield. So here you can see, here's the box shape, a bit stretched because the kind of screenshot that I've taken, but let's kind of see this kind of in play and how this move kind of moves on. So just watch this attack go through. And this led to a chance. We're going to see the build out from the back. So sorry, this kind of get back. Here we go. So Cody gets the ball. He's going to play it back to Solacek, who started in goal. Into Winks. Winks plays it into Ricardo for the quick return. And here's the box, the shape there. And look how we managed to get on the bike. And you see here, Pratt's managed to pick up the ball and he was completely free. And because he's played it very quick, first time to Castagna, look at all this. All these moves are one touch, one touch, one touch. This is not the best touch from Vardy, but he still managed to make something from it. So here's the key. This is the whole point about this box midfield, is that basically this player here who's in Ricardo, he's got in a difficult position. Does he either mark Dennis Pratt, who he probably started on, or does he go to Ricardo, who the ball's been played to? And in your coaching, I would probably tell the player that you should make the run up to go and get Ricardo, because you've got defenders behind you. It's not catastrophic if you were to lose the ball, and therefore you don't want to kind of give them time to do that. That's what the typical coaching manual says. Maybe it's going to have to be rewritten, who knows? But because he's done that, what this means is that Dennis Pratt now is completely free. And this is going to be the point. So playing this season is about generating these superiorities, giving some of our better players time and space on the ball. And because they're going to be good, they're going to make something come from it. So this is just one example when we've used it from the get-go in building our attacks. But there are lots of ways to do this. And this is like really, really cool with Enzo Maresca. And something that I've seen him say many times is that he actually did a thesis when he did his own coaching badges, and he talks about how he thought football and chess were actually very similar to one another. And he said that, like, in chess, what you do is you set your pieces, you think about how the opponent's going to play, and you try and force them into a shape. And so I don't know if you've ever played chess, but you've got this concept of like a bad spaced bishop where, like, you know, he's all blocked out and he can't do anything. So it's a useless piece. And it's a bit similar here. Like, what we've done here is that look how many players we've taken out of the game already. Northampton have committed here 5 players up here. Right now, they're not back for the transition. And if we're quick, that means there's so much space for us to take into account. And that's going to be the way that we play. So that's cool. I've kind of already touched upon it, but now we're going to watch the next point that I want to kind of make, which is like playing out from the back. Now, this is something that we have done plenty of times before, but we've not really done it in the same way. Here, look at the position of Stolarczyk and Cody. They're almost playing as a back two. It's almost like there is no goalkeeper because he's stepped up to be a centre-back. What Cody's trying to do is he's trying to draw the defender onto him. If the defender comes to him, he can play the sideways pass to Stolarczyk, and then we can kind of go here. Now, actually, I've used this example because this is actually where it does not work. So you'll actually see that Cody on the ball here, he's waiting for the 19 to come to him. The 19's not biting. So he's going to go, okay, fair enough. I'm just going to keep playing. You know, that's going to happen sometimes. And the ball here is lost. They've tried to play the quick bounce pass again, but it has been read this time. And we've almost kind of like given away some dangerous territory. Now, I think this is going to be a bit of a preview going forward. I don't know if you watched the game, but it was absolutely hilarious. Matt Elliott was really getting upset about this, maybe because he's from a different sort of generation. Look, to be fair to him, he understands what's going on, but I think he was getting nervous. And I will say, I expect us to actually concede quite a few goals from making some mistakes like this. But the point is that whilst we might concede, let's say we concede 5 goals like this in the season, how many goals will we generate because of the first example when we've played out for it? And I think what this is really good at is this leads us on to someone who's recently joined the club, and it's Mads Hermansen. So unless you've lived under a rock, Leicester have signed a keeper. We've just got the 4 on the books at the moment. What's it going to mean for Iversen and Ward? I think Iversen will go. Ward, I'm not so sure because I'm not so sure how many takers he'll get.
He's not even featured.
Yeah.
Yes, he's not even featured at all.
And we're just going to play this quickly and just show you some of like his clips. And what really stands out about this goalkeeper is just how good he is on the ball. It's actually, I'm not even joking. I actually think he could play as number 8. That's how good his passing is. Like, he can play both feet. I mean, look at that. Great, clips it in. And look, the attack is away here. He can seem to get any distance. He's comfortable chopping back. He can come forwards. And I think this is interesting because, you know, again, like typically people think from a goalkeeper, you want someone who's an excellent shot stopper, big physical frame. And he's probably quite weak in those 2 areas from what I say. I wouldn't say weak, but he's definitely not his strong point. But he's literally acting as a Tielemans, but as a goalkeeper, if that makes sense, you know, peak passing the ball. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what he can do. And I think that we're going to probably see a lot of good stuff kind of come from him. And finally, before I kind of pass it back to you, yes, let's talk about Wilfred Ndidi, who I thought was super interesting. So something that Man City were really famous for was this concept of an inside channel run or attacking the half space. I know Tactica loves this half space as well. He calls Maresca the half space lover. But really, there's one player who is synonymous in Europe about being probably the best half space player in the world, and that is Kevin De Bruyne. And the amount of times that you will see him for Man City How does he always find this space? Well, there's kind of a reason for it, right? They are deliberately looking to find it. So here we can see Wilfred Ndidi. And this, if I replace this with Kevin De Bruyne, you wouldn't be surprised. He makes this run all the time for Man City. So you can see here, he's getting himself between the lines, asks for it, calls for it, receives the ball. Look how much time he's got on the ball. Not the best cross, but he manages to play one in. Daka perhaps could score here. That's one example. Here's another time. Again, this time it's Vestergaard who's building our attacks. Interesting that he's been chosen for that position. Didi again, look at that, beats his man. He's free again. Not the worst cross in the world that he's kind of played then. We're going to probably see this more and more. So, as I said to you, do I think that we're going to see Wilfred Ndidi become, the next KDB? Definitely not. But I think that is something we're going to see. I think it's interesting that we were linked very strongly with Cesare Casadei from Chelsea, who was a top scorer at the Under-20 World Cup. He had 7 goals, a lot of them from midfield. So I think, probably our scouting department's been told, I want you to find me a midfielder who's great at arriving in the box and being able to finish. And he said, I've got just a man for you. And then he's probably said, no, I'm going to stay at Chelsea, which is fair enough. But I think we will see some movement in that area, and I expect there to do that. So there you go. That's a bit of a TLDR. There's a lot more we could talk about, a lot more that we could go through, but let's not bore the viewers. But let's see what Maresca can do this season.
No, that's fantastic. That's really good, really great stuff there. Again, about Hermansen, and again, I've not managed to do a video on it as of yet, but there's some fantastic, and I'm really excited about. And you mentioned about the lack of height, and one of the things that I think will be quite useful. It'll be interesting to see what he does with Vestergaard, because I think he was actually quite decent in this game. When you're playing on the counter-attack, he's all over the place. He needs somebody to cover him behind. However, that's his strength. Well, we've got possession and we can play out from the back. We've got a spine of potentially. If Connor Cody for me isn't the right guy to do it. Potentially, you've got Vestergaard that is, and even Harry Winks could be that person as well. So you've got the option. You don't have to rely on him as well. And one thing to mention in terms of that spine, obviously Vardy up top. Obviously, he scored in the behind closed door preseason friendly, which was really good. But the Solarcic was the person. I'll get up the presentation one at the moment. If you actually look at the latest one, it's funny that you mentioned the coach's voice. I'll come back to that in a second. But Maresca's actually on one of the ones next one as well.
Yeah. Well, we're going to probably be subscribing for 1 week only to see what he's got to say there. But you make some interesting points there. So I think, why Vardy over someone like Daka or Iheanacho? But I think if you look at the way that Man City play, they used Haaland. But actually, the interesting thing about Haaland is that in most games, he was touching the ball very little. Quite frequently, he was touching the ball like maybe 12 times the entire game, but would still score a hat-trick. And it's like, who does that remind you of? It's Jamie Vardy. He's that so many times. So it's just about, and his movement is still elite. Like, he might not be fast, but Haaland literally said that he was recommended by his coaches. You need to look at Jamie Vardy. You need to add this to your game. That was in particular playing on the shoulder and the space in behind. But I can see why they might do that. In my opinion, I think, Iheanacho is a different type of player. He's more of like a linker. There's definitely pros and cons to that. Daka's got the finishing, absolutely. But I mean, his movement and his hold-up play is quite lacking. I think we all want him to develop into that player. We really hope he can do. But quite interesting that he stayed with it. I mean, to be honest with you, I think if you're a new manager at a club, the first thing you want to do is get everyone on side, right? Like, I remember Brendan played Wes Morgan in his first game in a back three. He was never going to play him again, but you just got to win the club captain over. And not just that, it's about like get the fans on side. Look, if we start the season with a couple of wins, after 5 games, we're already in the top 5. Everyone's going to feel comfortable, going to be happy. What you don't want to do is start the season. You've already antagonized a few of the key dressing room voices. You draw and you lose some games. All of a sudden that excitement, and maybe we do get on the phone to Scott Parker and you say, "What are you doing, mate?" And I hope that doesn't happen, but you never know.
I don't think it will, because even taking that game, so recently we won 4-2. The game this time last year we played against Leuven away from them, and we got battered in that game.
I remember that. Yeah.
Friendly. And we came away just about hanging on for a 3-3. And I think Daka turned up later on. I can't remember who else there was, but it was a good performance. That I think that we didn't see this game, but from the tactics, the way they're working, it shows you there is progression. And one thing I want to mention as well, something that fans are I think fans in general, they see the likes of James Maddison leaving. When you've got that box midfield, is there a need for a number 10 anymore? Because obviously it looks like KDH and he seems to really like Pratt. Both of them seem quite similar but different kind of profiles of play.
Great question, I would say. Yeah. I mean, look, the thing is that KDB is a good example of that because he kind of plays more as a 10 for Belgium, but more in this kind of hybrid 8/10 for Man City. So I think you're right. I think actually we don't need I mean, to be honest with you, the number 10 has kind of gone extinct from the modern game. I kind of feel a bit sorry for James Maddison. If he'd been around in like the Zidane era or something like that, people would be saying, I actually think they'd build the England team around him. I honestly think that because he was kind of a throwback. But in this day and age, that's why he's been shunted out onto the wing or having to play this hybrid position because there isn't really time for that. Even Zidane himself, in my opinion, he would have to really change it. He's even said as much. He goes, in the current game, I wouldn't be able to play the way that I did because I can't just stroll about and wait for Didier Deschamps to give me the ball. I'd actually have to work hard and stuff like that. But you're right. I think what would be needed instead is you're looking for like certain attributes. They've got to have an engine on them. They've really got to be able to work hard and press. That's why it didn't surprise me actually that Ndidi did that. You know, the physicality is important. Something Man City have done actually over the last sort of 3-4 years is now they're a very physical team. They've got really kind of dominant, strong, tough players, and it's made them harder to beat. I think they recognize that they were dropping points from being a bit, you know, weak. And I think we've noticed that, you know, I would actually argue that's one of the reasons we got relegated actually, is it's kind of being not able to compete physically against certain teams. Like West Ham and Palace, you know, used to get results against us, I would find. Although we actually beat West Ham twice last season, but, you know, more of an outlier, I would say.
I think it was more the mental thing. For example, the Arsenal, we talked about off camera, the 4-2. The fact is, losing to Arsenal is not the problem, especially in the form they were in. It was the fact that we went 3-2 up or 2-1 up. Well, okay, we're in the game now. Conceded a minute later.
Yeah.
That was one of the biggest things. Tielemans went missing, and Diddy went missing. That midfield had a massive, it was like a donut. There was just nothing in the field.
Yeah, I remember that game. Gabriel Jesus had an absolute field day. But he actually that was Wesley Fofana's last game, and he actually made him look pretty poor, I have to say. Yeah, coming back, so what attributes would that sort of player need? Well, we talked about Casadei there. You're looking at someone who is, I think, really good at arriving in the box late, someone who can finish, but they also have to be able to work hard. They're kind of box to box, you know, good tackler, good kind of all-round game. I feel like KDH is pretty good in that regard. The one thing I think he needs to improve are his numbers. He's not the best in terms of finishing. Like, I think that was something that has been mentioned by a lot of people, even last year, that, you know, there's a lot of that's good about his game, but you look at the end product and it's not really there. I think he'll develop that quite strongly, especially under this manager. He was really good in the Championship last time around. So again, I think he'd be an early contender for one of the better players in this division. And, you know, if he stays, I think he will stay. I think Dennis Pratt, to be totally honest with you, is ideally suited. When he played for Torino, they actually used a diamond formation. And in that system, they call it a Mazzala. And it's very similar to that. It's someone who kind of starts narrow, but they drift wide, they drift in between the lines, and they are expected to contribute to the attack. So Maresca was quite positive, you know, glowing about him, I would say, which I found interesting because I actually felt against Northampton, he injured one of their players. I don't know if you remember that. He actually got stuck into someone. He got stretchered off, and then he's been quite dirty in a good way, I suppose. Kind of all right, but I don't think he was that good. But he scored today, didn't he, against the yesterday against OHL? So yeah, I could see him being quite well suited to this position. But you just said it yourself there, like, you know, do these players even want to be here this season? The big thing I would say is that, like, if players don't want to be here, they should not be anywhere near the first team, or even actually we just talked about Casadei, but apparently a deal was agreed with him, but the player himself didn't want to come. Now, I could see someone like that still turn up on the last day of the transfer window because he's got no other options. But honestly, I would prefer that we don't do that. Like, find a different youngster that's actually really hungry, that wants to impress, even if they're slightly worse. I just think the mental side is so important. But, you know, Maresca, something that I really like about him is that he talks about winning mentality a lot, and he played for Juventus. And I've seen in one of his interviews how he said that, like, before he went to Juventus, he didn't really understand the sort of elite winning mentality. Whereas Juventus and Italian football in general, quite often, they don't really care if you play absolutely awful. It's, did you win? And so there he knew that, like, even if you come off the pitch in a draw and you played well, fans are booing you because they're a club that's expected to dominate. So I think that is something that he could bring here. And well, let's hope so, because that is got to be the number one problem at the club, right? His mentality.
Yeah, it's again, and that especially last season, there was so many fans that we've interviewed on the show going, "You'll be fine, you'll stay up." And I was going, you have not seen us win. And from Aston Villa fans that had watched them under Steven Gerrard, and at the beginning of the season, it was us, Wolves, Nottingham Forest. It was all the Midland clubs, all down there. Again, we managed to sort it out. Just going back to that, something that you mentioned about having that box-to-box midfielder. I don't know how much you've watched of Sami Braybrooke. Could he be an option in that midfield? Because he spoke to Rob about it, and he goes, after watching him for a long period of time, he goes, Enzo would like the kind of player that Braybrooke would develop into. Because again, he's not got the physicality, but he's that person that can arrive in the box late as well.
He is the Winks replacement for me. I think I've seen him play a bit. I don't know if you sometimes watch it. They do have the games on the official site of the development team. He is, in my opinion, more suited to be a kind of deep lying playmaker. So I think he's quite press resistant from what I've seen. Actually, he's got quite a good long pass on him as well. So I've got a feeling that, like, I think Winks. It's kind of funny when we signed Harry Winks. At first, I was really disappointed. And then I sort of remembered to myself, hang on a minute, though, we're not in the Premier League. We're in the Championship. And he played in the Champions League final. And I started looking at a lot of his footage and stuff like that. And I got to be honest and say, especially under Pochettino, he was a pretty good player. He's just got a sort of a skill set that, like, is good in a certain system and bad in others. And so it's no surprise to me that he struggled badly with Conte, Mourinho, but did well with Pochettino. So yeah, coming back to Braybrooke, I think that's the position he'll play. He'll be one of those people that acts as the pivot, the distributor, like everything kind of goes through him. They don't need to necessarily look flash, but it's like being able to play that, like the Rodri role for Man City. It's like sometimes, you look at him and you might think, oh, why is this guy valued so highly? But then other times, especially in the high pressure games, he just never makes a mistake. He just like keeps the ball. Like his pass completion rate must be like 90+%. His decision making is great. So that's high praise for Rob to say that about him. Look, we don't know. I think it's a big shame actually that both him and Will Alves are out for quite some time, because I think that, like, another big thing actually is that Maresca's decided to use Marcel Madabadua as the winger. He's even given him the 7 shirt, have you noticed, which is Harvey Barnes' shirt, right? Yeah. So that's quite a statement. I wonder if he's pulled him aside and he says, I'm going to give you a shot in the team and, get this sort of young, hungry player in. I don't think he was the best, if I'm being honest, but at the same time, I'm definitely not going to write off a youngster so early on. I think all players, no matter who you are, you kind of need like 10 games to like really kind of prove yourself. Like, I don't know about you, but I actually remember when Ricardo first started playing for Leicester, he actually was pretty bad in his first couple of games. I remember he got absolutely mugged against Bournemouth. No, Bournemouth, where like I think we lost 4-2 or something like that. Ricardo was at fault for like 2 goals, and a lot of people were like, "Oh God, who have we signed?" And then like 5 games later, it's like, I think we've got the best right back in the division. Even Johnny Evans struggled a bit when he first signed before he kind of started becoming elite. So yeah, I certainly don't think. Yeah, look at Harvey Barnes or even KDH. They took a little while to get into the team. One thing I will say, actually, I kind of forgot to say in my wrap up though, is that like that's all well and good talking about the positives of that system, but what are the negatives? I think definitely the overriding thing is like, well, where are the wingers at, or these wide attacking players? Like, where we literally, as of the time we speak about this, I've seen clips of Harvey Barnes doing press clips for Newcastle on Twitter. So he's about to sign for there. And I'm personally quite sad that he's leaving because I really like him. But then that means right now our wing options are Mark Albrighton, who spent half the season on loan at West Brom. And Wanya Marcel Madabadua, who has never played a Premier League or even Championship game in his life. So I would definitely expect incomings to come into that kind of place. And I think we desperately need them because, again, if you look at Man City over the years, they've had players like Mahrez, Sane, Sterling. These days, they tend to go for more kind of hybrid players like Jack Grealish. Bernardo sometimes plays out there as well. So these are players that kind of almost act as both a wide man and almost like a number 8/10. So again, you've got to be quite flexible. But I think that's a big thing that we've got to think about this season as well, is that the players that I think we'll have will be very fluid in their positions. So, like Callum Doyle is a good example of that. Yeah, Dennis Pratt.
When we've seen him before, and he was, I thought his time at Leicester was done. Some of the things that Maresca said, again, Jamie Vardy, the first thing he came in, he goes, Vardy's part of my plan.
Yeah.
And what you're saying, again, about Haaland makes that clear. His final touch there, but again, we're talking about pre-season. There's still time. And Vardy, for me, has still got that. He just needs to get that box around him and the wingers to do the running for him. And then he just needs to arrive. His positional play is still as good as it's ever been.
He's been captain in all of the games so far as well, and everyone expects it to be Connor Cody. I mean, I do have to say, every time that I've seen Connor Cody play so far, he is so loud, you can hear him. Even in the I don't know if you saw, OHL posted a video of the game. It was like, weird camera angles and stuff. But you can hear Cody so much in that video. It's kind of hilarious. So he's very influential. Good on the boy.
John Percy, I think, was recently on the When You Smiling podcast, BBC Leicester podcast, and he mentioned, because he reports on a lot of Midlands, the two people he remembered talking about, Connor Cody and Kasper Schmeichel. And we know how bad Kasper Schmeichel was during lockdown. So
yeah, that was amazing, Schmeichel in lockdown, wasn't it? Like, you could just, he was like, never stop talking. And yeah, you can tell why someone like that was such a huge miss. So
yeah, so I think there's some really interesting stuff you mentioned there. I think one thing as well is that I was just mentioned, in terms of Ricardo replacement, obviously coming in, he'll be that position looks like it's his, and that's also something that Brendan Rodgers wanted to build around. Now coming into this, the player that's going to replace him would be James Justin. Now for me, Justin doesn't. He would be more suited as kind of a wing back. Again, he can play as a back three. He can play on the wing. For me, I want to see how he adapts. He's a very flexible person. He can play all down the back line, but I can't see him as adjusting to that position as well. And the thing is, with Ricardo coming back from the injury, because bear in mind,
they're both injured, weren't they?
Yeah, they're constantly injured. And also, we can't expect Ricardo to play all 48 games this season. There's 46 games. We just can't expect him to.
I will say, I think you are being a little bit harsh on Justin there, just because Brendan did this thing where he was using James Justin as an overloaded centre-back. So he was playing as a right centre-back in the three. And the way that the team was set up is that he would become the free man and he would kind of join the attacks and he'd be able to sort of drive through and do things. So I think he's more in, he's got good football intelligence, I guess is what I was going to say. So like, yeah, off screen, we were kind of talking about how Man City, they put John Stones in that role, but they actually tried Kyle Walker in that role and it didn't work. And they tried João Cancelo in that role and it didn't work. And they actually tried one of the youngsters called Rico Lewis, and he actually was pretty good in the position and he stayed in the team for a while. And, Pep's no fool. It's like, he knows that, like, he says, like, Kyle Walker's like the best. If you kind of concede possession, he can get them out of trouble so many times because he's just so fast that he can catch up and make these amazing recovery tackles. But if you're asking him to build the play and pick the pass, not the guy for that. He's better at marauding. So I get what you're saying. You're saying that JJ's more like that, but who knows? I've definitely seen that he's got, I don't think he embarrassed himself playing in that position. No, I do think the interesting thing is Castagna wasn't used there, right? And they've used Castagna out wide, right?
That was going to literally be my point.
Oh, here we go.
This up just from again, we're talking again. It's not as amazing as your presentation, obviously, but we've got Castagna in that they played a lot of the same team again. Slajic, as you were mentioning, he was given the number 1 shirt. If you've seen that as well, he was given the number 1. So it looks like obviously Enzo prefers a player, and he actually played twice in the 3 halves against Leuven. And
he's played both the previous games as well. He has as well. Yeah,
exactly. So I think for that reason that he looks the most comfortable on the ball. I think that's the reason why he was played. But Iversen, especially in the second half, when I looked, he looked out of place. He looked hurried. He looked like, I don't really want to do this. And that's what, for me, I think that's why we brought in Hermansen as well, because he plays the way that Enzo wants to play. Considering we've even got Slajic, Ward hasn't even featured, and Iversen's played less games than Slajic.
Do you feel sorry for Iversen though? Like, he spent the last sort of 5 years behind the Danish number 1 in both club and country level, and just when he finally gets his shot, he's still going to be the number 2 to another guy who's a bit younger than him, but
that's been behind him. The thing is, that is football. He will go. Yeah. There will be teams queuing up for him in the Champions.
Yeah. Probably Alex Neil at Stoke would be my prediction.
Yeah, he will be fantastic for another team. Just not for the. He's a victim of us playing great football, as bad as it sounds. Because if we played a 4-4-2, he'd be brilliant. If he played like in the title-winning season, he would be Kasper Schmeichel. But we need somebody that plays slightly differently, as you were mentioning, coming alongside. Slajic looked a little bit feeble at times, but after a while he started to grow into the position. Whilst Iversen looked kind of all over the place. Yeah. It's like it was too quick for him the entire time. The play and how quickly that Enzo wanted to play.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing about Slajic is he's still not, as far as I know, played for Leicester in the first team. So I get a feeling he will be the backup to Hermansen. It will be interesting though, because I could actually see an argument if he wanted to stay of keeping Iversen, because not every I think this is really good about Maresca as well, is that he has said that this is the idea so far, but he's not against changing the idea. Because this system, what I think is really good for is that teams that are going to sit back and defend, it can break them down. And I have to say that was why I was really worried when I thought that Dean Smith or Scott Parker or Jesse Marsh might come into the club, because the systems that you use, even Jesse Marsh with the Red Bull style, has not really been proven too well in the English league. Hassan Hüttl tried it, didn't work. Ralph Rangnick tried it, didn't work. Jesse Marsh tried it, didn't work. Does it work in England? Not sure. Anyway, that's going on a bit of a tirade. There's a bit of we had that topic in the coaches course, actually. I remember that was quite funny. But yeah, it's I think he really, what if you play a team that's more direct? You might need someone who is a much more imposing presence. Literally, can you do it on the cold, wet Tuesday night at Stoke? Right. And when you're playing that and the pitch is absolutely awful and it's bobbling all over the place, you don't want someone who's weak in goal. And in fact, you might not want to be playing pretty football. You just want to load up the team with the hard men and just try and grind out something. So I don't think he will stay. I think he's way too good to stay. And like I say, my feeling is I do feel sorry for him, because I feel like last season, actually, that Arsenal game was the one where I was like, Danny Ward is absolutely awful. It was that early on for me. I was like, this guy cannot. You just know that when you haven't got the fundamental skills, it was his positioning for me. That was the thing that I recognized really early on. That even when we kept clean sheets, he was getting away with it rather than being good. And you got to replace with someone. And I felt the whole point was that they were going to compete against one another. And why Brendan didn't change him over? Well, my opinion is I actually think Brendan wanted the sack to get the payoff, so that's why he did it. Conspiracy theory time. But yeah, and I feel sorry, because if you look, there's an alternative timeline where Daniel Iversen comes in, Leicester stay up. He's our number one goalkeeper coming into this season. He goes on to have an amazing career, becomes the new Danish heartthrob and hero for all of us in the stands. And instead he's going to end up going to some championship club to sign in. That's life. That's life.
It is. And that's the thing with Iversen. It's the problem that De Gea had at Man United. It's exactly the same problem, I think.
Very topical, because they've just signed Onana, haven't they, for that same reason? Yeah,
literally for the exact same. Not because De Gea is a bad player, but you can see some of his shot stopping is phenomenal.
Yeah.
But he can't play out from the back. And when you've got Ten Hag, who's I think he came from the Pep Guardiola school of thinking, didn't he?
He worked with him. He worked with him as a coach when they were at Bayern together, so he's learned from them. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen it. There's this amazing clip where early on in Ten Hag's reign, I think it was against Brentford, the ball goes back to De Gea. He smashes it, and Ten Hag on the sideline just going, David, what are you doing? Because he spent all pre-season talking about how you play it from the back, and literally the second pass he received in the game, you smashed it. And you know what? Actually, I'll just give you a quick anecdote, which is that a lot of people say, oh, but can't a goalkeeper develop their kicking and get better, right? And as a coach, you can definitely make a program and get people and do them the drills and stuff like that. But I have to say that in that position in particular, because goalkeepers are not really selected for their kicking ability, they're often pretty poor in that department. I guess that's like saying, why don't we put Neil in as winger instead of, Mark Albrighton? And I don't know, for all I know, you're elite and you're just decided you don't want
to. No way near good enough.
Right. And it's probably because, you just can't move your feet, or you're not that good. I play every week and I'm awful as well. Just want to throw that out there, right? I'm just basically the token guy that's good at talking, but not good at playing. But that's just how it is, right? And some people haven't got that. And so I basically what I'm saying, I think it's the same with David De Gea as well. It's just you're never going to get good enough with your feet. It's not a case of they can't be coached, but it's just look, it's called elite sports for a reason. How many people from the youth academy actually make it as a professional player? It's 0.01% or something like that. So yeah, it's unlikely. You're already going to have that ability or not when you've got to elite level, and Iversen doesn't have it. So Hermansen's come in.
Yeah, I think it's a downfall in the same way it's a downfall of when Man United had to sell Johnny Evans, not because he's a bad player, just because he couldn't get in the team. And I think that's where it's going to be a similar position to us. I was listening to recently a KDH who was on the Fozcast for 8 months ago, and he was mentioning it wasn't 0.1, it was 2% of all players.
Okay. Well, that's a lot better than I thought then. There you go. Yeah. But, still pretty slim, yeah.
it's still pretty slim. And I just want to get a couple of thoughts again. You mentioned wings, we went with Cody. Casey McAteer, in that position, he looks like, again, he's a player that can play, from what I've seen, either winger, he can play in the centre, he can play pretty much anywhere, not in the striker, but he can play in multiple positions. And that versatility is something that we're going to need as well. So I just want to get your thoughts on, because I've not seen too much of him in pre-season, but is he a player?
He scored, didn't he? He scored in the 4-2. Yeah, look, I have to be honest. Like, I've seen him play. I don't know too much about him. I do know there's a few guys on, especially the Foxes Talk, that really watch the development team. They even know like who's highly rated and who isn't. So, for example, I don't know if you know this, but we actually just recently lost a player to Man City who didn't sign his first contract with us. And so obviously that's a big shame, because they thought he was going to be pretty good, right? And apparently Casey McAteer was not that highly rated at Leicester. He hasn't really impressed on his loan, but he's in the team right now. And to be honest with you, I felt he did quite a good job. So the game that I saw against Northampton, he was actually playing as one of the number 8s, so making runs. And he was playing good ball first time, distributing it pretty quickly, getting it down the wing. You know, that move actually, that Daka, so, and you know, indeed he should have scored with his left foot. That actually came through McAteer, so he played pretty good there. Look, I would say that, like, I think it's too early to judge. 46 games just in the league, plus a minimum of 2 cup games. So that's 48 games, as you say. I would be surprised if someone like Casey McAteer doesn't end up with at least between substitute and start, 10 games minimum, maybe more. And if he can prove himself, great. You know, like all the Leicester fans want to see. I will be honest with you. I know everyone gets really excited about seeing new transfers and who's coming in, because everyone wants to play Football Manager in real life, right? But I actually think that, like, if you were someone who was building a club and want to own it, it's much better if you can actually get people who have been ingrained in your system and come through the academy to be playing in the team. But I think Manchester United have some incredible record that they've played someone from their academy for the last 35 years or something. Every first team they've done has always had a minimum of 1 player, right? And that means sometimes you get injuries and stuff like that. So, and I think that's, real testament to that. So, yeah, I'd love to see one of these stars break out. Do you know, I think it would be a good competition. Maybe we should do, just before the season starts, you can run like a poll, like, who do you think the breakout young player will be? Because it could be him. It could be Marcel Madavadua. It could be someone else that comes in, like, Ben Nelson's. Yeah. Well, if he comes in late, I mean, he'll probably start in Christmas. But I predict he'll be a really good impact player, I think. Like, I think I could see him coming on in like the last 10, 15-minute games. Yeah, because actually one thing I was going to say, that if you look at our squad, one thing that we're really lacking as well is who's the X factor, right? Do you know what I mean? It's like, I remember a title-winning season. We were away at Watford. Games like really like one of those board draws. It's going to be a 0-0. Neither team's really on top. Then boom, Mahrez gets it, pops it out of his feet, top bins, we win the game. James Maddison, Yuri Tillemans just scores like an outrageous goal out of nothing, and we win the game. Who can do that in the squad?
That's the thing at the moment. I'm not sure who that is. The only person that I'm coming back down to is probably a player that probably is likely to leave, Iheanacho. That's the only player that's really coming to mind. And that's kind of bringing me on to something I was going to mention to you as well. Looking at his positioning, because again, just go to tacticas just to get that back up again. One of the positions he uses very similarly. He plays that, again, out on this wing side. I know, obviously, it's rated. Daka wasn't really operating this position. We probably need somebody else in Madison's place, because we haven't got somebody else. But Iheanacho plays to that top role. But Daka played alongside him. Is that something that playing 2 up top? I don't really see that too much with like Pep's team, and I can't really see how Enzo does that. Is it just because at the moment we're just lacking in players?
Do you know what? That's a really great question. It's one of those things that, like, I've seen that, like, Daka's one of those really divisive players amongst the Leicester fan base, right? Yeah. Some people have already written him off, think that, is a waste. I don't know about you. I was so excited when we got him, because looking at him play and his statistics, I thought if ever there was a player who could take over from Vardy, it's this guy, because Iheanacho is a different type of player. I'll be honest with you, I'm a little bit concerned that he is being used in that position, because I just don't see it really. I mean, that said, I just literally showed a clip where he could have scored, and it was on his stronger right foot, but that's not in a position that you'd expect him to be. He should be in the Iheanacho position. So what's he doing out there? Now, look, he is fast, definitely fast, and he can definitely finish, but I just don't see him. You're not playing to his strengths if he plays there. So why is he not playing as a central one? But then, Maresca's just come off winning a treble with Man City, and he coached the Man City players to their first ever PL2 win. I think the guy knows what he's doing. I was going to say that. I don't know about you, but when I saw that Northampton performance, even though the score might only have been 1-0, from a coaching perspective, I cannot emphasize how impressed I was. Because if you've only worked with a group of players for 2 weeks and to have really complex instructions like that, and for them to basically carry it out, I'm jealous, because I'm thinking in my head how I would do that. The level of presentation, that's actually the reason why I made a presentation for you there, is that's kind of thing that you do, right? If you're trying to explain an idea to a team of players, that's the skill of being a coach, right? It's how do you get that tactical idea across and get them to get buy-in in it, and they don't just think that you're, smoking crack or whatever illegal substance and stuff like that. So he's managed to get it pretty much working. And this is despite the fact that it's a team with low morale. 7 players have left. Some of the best players have left. He's using square pegs in round holes, and he's still getting them playing quite cohesively. So coming back to your question, I don't see Daka playing that. Well, do you know what? Maybe he will, because we haven't got anyone else there. But I think that's a waste if we do it there. I think he should be playing with Vardy. But what's going to happen? I mean, Rob Tanner's obviously talks about Joel Perreault, but he seems to me, to be honest with you, he's another one that some people say he can come off the sides. But I was looking through some Swansea footage and I didn't really see it. He just seemed like a good front man. Yeah, I'm a good player. Don't get me wrong. He's one of those players that I don't know about you, but again, when we signed Cody and Wings, initially I was a bit but these are kind of the ones that go wrong for Leicester, this sort of older profile that is coming to the end of their career. The best Leicester signings are always Fofana. Even Mahrez and Kante, when they joined the club, were young, early 20s. Maguire, Maddison, Tielemans even, right? These players that have got young, hungry, got something to prove, and they can grow into it, So yeah, I think Joel Perreault would be a good signing in that regard, but I just don't think we'd need someone like that. Yeah,
I think we needed somebody in those positions, A, to replace Tielemans, and B, to replace Johnny Evans. For me, that was the right move. And I'm surprised we got them, because because I wouldn't thought they dropped the chance. When we were linked to Cody initially, I went, no chance. We're not good enough to get him. And the fact we've got him, fantastic. I think we need that. I mentioned to Rob when we did the interview, the senior leadership team. So Cody's definitely coming with that. I'm just super impressed with the way he talks, and the way he speaks. And I think if you listen to him and KDH have a post-match for Leicester City, if you listen to that, they mention about the tactics. So how's it been adapting? And they've both gone, it wasn't too bad. It was actually, without sounding too bad, it was actually quite easy. So if you hear that, it's really, really quite something. So they're saying it already, which is good. And again, the real test for me is what happens in the preseason. We've obviously got Spurs against James Maddison soon, and we've got Liverpool. Now, I'm not saying we're going to be close to their level. It's still a preseason friendly, but the ambition is get back to the Premier League. These are 2 well-established Premier League teams that have spent good money on good players so far.
Including one of ours.
Yeah, including one of ours.
The only thing with that, though, is I wouldn't get too upset what the result is there, simply because it's even the performance, because the thing is they're going to be playing in stifling humidity. And the thing is, if you're trying to play a high-pressing game in those sort of conditions, I don't know if you've ever done that before. I remember once I was in Cyprus and I just happened to play 5-a-side because why not? And I was absolutely heaving. I'm in quite good shape normally, right? I could run 10K in 45 minutes pretty easily, sort of thing. But that is just you're just it's in such bad condition. So the thing is, look, to be honest, that will also apply to them too. And both Liverpool definitely play a high press game. Spurs, with their new manager, want to play that way as well. So maybe it'll kind of cancel each other out. But what I'm saying is that I know what you're saying normally. That's why I was really looking at the Northampton game so closely. I wanted to really examine what the new manager is going to be about. But whilst I'll definitely watch these games with a fine-tooth comb, I'm not sure you can really say too much about them given those conditions. I don't just want to be a sellout for that, but it's just I've seen teams play in the States as well, and it's the same thing. They just become farcical. They're just to make money. Let's be honest. They're just to make money. So and
take the brand awareness is what Al wants to be. At the end of the day, they want they want to grow into that club. That again, they're liked as a club. Even Hermansen, when he came in, said, "I like the story of winning the league." But they want to be they are doing things the right way in terms of the way the owners are doing. But we're not going to. they will be surprised if there was 1% of both games that had Leicester shirts. It is going to be Spurs and it's going to be Liverpool that are going to dominate the majority, and that's just got what we've got to expect. And especially with well, Asian culture, there's not as much. You don't stick to one team. You can kind of, it's more acceptable.
Yeah. Glory hunters. Yeah,
it is. It's just more acceptable culturally in Asia than definitely not in the UK.
Yeah.
So
Leicester till we die, exactly. 100% agree with you with that. So yeah, look, I think I think this is worth talking about as well then going forwards, because like I think, one thing actually why I wanted to come on here and kind of explain the tactics is, I don't know about you, but a lot of the time when I go to matches, you still get quite old school mentality in the grounds. Like, just lump it forward. That's and like not really understanding why that is. And we're still going to get that. And you have to be kind of patient with it and like learning this kind of new style. So that's number one, so people can kind of see that. I think if you look at Burnley last season as well, who went on to be one of the best teams ever in the Championship, by the way. Not the best. The best, I think, was Reading with 105 points, but they got a good tally.
What did we get? 102?
Yeah, something like that, or 101, something like that. Still pretty good, like, good tally. But I mean, yeah, and I heard actually by the end of the season, but they were just like mucking around. He was like trying new players and stuff like that. So he knew that it was secured. So fair play. But I think that like what they happened with them is their first couple of games, they were like either getting draws or just grinding out the win. They had a lot of possession, but they didn't really score many goals. And I think we're going to see the same thing. Because like some of these attacking players are only just going to join the club. It's only 2 weeks from now, really, to start the season, right? I mean, so yeah, I just think you've got to be a bit patient. I think I wouldn't really make any judgments really till 10 games in. I think even then, look, of course, if we've lost 10 games, that would be a different story, right? But I think there is still a good chance that we may not be at the higher echelons just to begin with. It might take a bit of time to get going. But as long as we kind of see this progress week on week, month on month, I do think what will happen is at some point it will click, and then I think we'll probably be too strong. I have to say right now, having seen, even though again we only won 1-0 against Northampton, I was like, if the manager can get that kind of tactical idea over to the players that quickly and they're already executing on it, and we've got the best squad in the league, it's hard not to see us going up. Don't know about winning. I think we could. It depends on what the other teams do. Like, Leeds have started slow, but now they've got big investment behind them. I think Southampton, their strategy last season was to buy all these youngsters and develop them. Now, they weren't good enough for the Premier League, but they might be good enough for this division. So I think people are kind of sleeping on them a little bit. They could be good. Borough, I think, are an underrated team, got to the playoff finals last year. Although I think we're trying to sign Ryan Giles, I've heard today, is potentially an incoming. So we could weaken them.
Isn't it?
Yeah, could weaken them. So it'd be interesting to see where he plays, because he's not really like, that left back stroke, left centre back role is getting pretty full up, right? You've got Doyle, who we've brought in, Victor Christensen, and Luke Thomas, who won with the England under 21. So, like just quickly, who do you think will go actually from the? Because you talked about Iheanacho, but he's been linked with a lot of clubs, and he's only got 1 year left on this contract. I would love him to stay, but I'll be honest, I got a feeling Daka will get game time because Iheanacho will go.
I think so. And I think that's why Joe Burrow's linked so strongly as well. The problem with Iheanacho is that he just can't find a club that works for him. He's a phenomenal player, but you have to he's been a bit part player, and Brendan Rodgers has been on. I don't like him. I don't want to. We play a 3-5-2. It just hasn't worked. I would love him to stay as well, but playing that formation, that 4, where does he fit in? He can't play out wide. He can't play left or right wide. He plays 9.5 between that. Can he do the role of a KDH or a Pratt? Probably not. So he doesn't really find a squad. But the problem is, nobody's even bidding for him. I don't think see where he really goes. And I feel sorry for him because I think he's a phenomenal player. And I think the fans love him. He scores He helped us win the FA Cup, which, again, Leicester fans remember. Other teams might not as much. He is Mr. FA Cup as well.
I think it says it all with Nacho as well, that like when we got relegated, he was the player that came out afterwards to speak to the press. Like, that should be your captain, It
wasn't. And what Evans said was pathetic as well.
Yeah.
The players all said their goodbyes. I was like, we've just been relegated. And
well, you could tell that they'd mentally checked out ages before that. Like, I don't know about you, but like, when did you know we were gone? I think that Bournemouth game where Rodgers had been sacked and we had Mike Stowell and Adam Sadler in charge. And it was like and Maddison did that hospital back pass. And it was just like, all the life had been sucked out of the team, and I just felt there's no way we really survived. I mean, actually, Dean Smith came in and got a win against Wolves and to follow that up, but even then, it looked bad. I mean, I'll be honest, I actually remember seeing the game against Liverpool where Wout Faes scored 2 own goals and thinking to myself,
okay, in that game, for once, we actually played okay in the game.
But you know what, when things like that happen, I just think to myself, do you know the sort of team that ends up losing because they scored 2 own goals when they played well? It's a team that gets relegated. And anyway, let's not dwell on the past. The future's bright, the future's blue. Come on, you foxes.
Yeah, and just thank you so much again. I'll leave your post down below as well. I'll leave Tacticas, and then I'll try. And then obviously we've got is there anything else you want to plug as well, Anna, before you go? But it's really great having you on, and thanks for the chat as well.
Welcome. I want to plug you, Beyond the 90. I think it's great. I was saying to you just off air, there's a lot of these kind of football content creators, but a lot of them really come across as like false or clickbaity. I think you're genuine Leicester fan. I think that's really good. So yeah, hopefully more people enjoy the channel, share with your friends, etc., etc. Smash a like, smash a subscribe, etc., etc. And see you in the next one, I guess.
Brilliant. No, thanks again. All that good stuff, as Alan was saying, and we'll see you all in the next video. If you want Al to come on, leave it in the comments. Would love to see again what you think of these kind of things. It's been a long chat and also some really good tactical analysis. I've absolutely loved it, Anil. So thank you so much. And we'll see you all in the next video. So goodbye.